In this tutorial, we'll be making a kaftan bubu with a scrub v-neck using a shoke. I have folded the fabric into four. At the top edge of this fabric, I am drawing a horizontal line, and that will serve as a shoulder line. On the shoulder line, I am going inwards from the front center with 3.5 inches for the neck width and 1.5 inches for the neck depth. I will connect the neck depth to the neck width using the cuff part of my pattern master. From the center front again, on the shoulder line again, I am placing a half of the shoulder measurement, and from that point I am adding 10 inches for the sleeve length. At the point of the sleeve length, I am going downwards with 1.5 inches, and I will connect that to meet the neck width. From the shoulder slope, I'll go downwards with 11.5 inches. At that point, I will draw a horizontal line and then connect it to meet the shoulder slope. On the vertical line, I'm going inwards with 1/2 inch and connecting it to meet the shoulder slope to make the sleeve sit proper. On the sleeve opening line, I am placing 1/4 of the hip circumference plus 3 inches for ease. You can do 4 inches or 5 inches. It depends on how big or wide you want the bubu. Then from the shoulder line, I measured 60 inches downwards for the gown length, and I have about 1.5 inches for the hem allowance. Now, on the gown length, I am placing what I have on the sleeve opening line. That's 11 inches plus 3 inches, that's 14 inches. Then I'll connect that point to meet the measurement we have on the sleeve opening line. And I'm placing 14 inches along the length just so I'll have a straight line to that point on the sleeve length. And that corner, I'll be using the cuff part of my pattern master to just blend it. And then for the pocket position, I am measuring 17 inches downwards from the shoulder slope, and I'll mark it and then cut this out. Notching the pocket position, I'll cut it all the way to the length. Now, I'll set the back panel aside, one of the pieces aside I will sell for the back panel. And for the front panel, I am going downwards from the shoulder line with 11 inches. I am using the bust point measurement. And because I'll be using this ashoke, which is about 6 1/4 inches, and on fold, it will be about 3 1/8 inches. That's about 3 inches. Okay, so then at the neck depth, I'll go inwards from the front center. At that point I marked 11 inches. I am going inwards with 1 inch. Now when it's open, that will be 2 inches. That's to make it lap properly. On the neck width, I am going from the basic neck width with 2 inches. Now the ashoke is 3 inches. I'll be using 1 inch for seam allowance. That's 1/2 inch for the fabric and 1/2 inch for the ashoke. Okay, and then we'll have 2 inches left that will replace the 2 inches we are cutting out. I am connecting that 2 inches on the shoulder line to the 1 inch that we marked there at the neck depth, and then I'm cutting it out. Cutting it out, I will need to open this. Okay, so on the round side of the fabric, I want to mark 1/2 inch all the way around the neck line. That's for easy stitching. And then I will measure it from the shoulder to the neck depth. I have about 12 inches. So I'll be cutting the ashoke of length 15 inches. So at the neck depth there, I'll be adding an interface. I'll just iron it to that point because a lot will be going on around that point just to give you some stability. Okay. On the shoke, I marked the wrong side of it and then I'll be ironing it on fold. I'll fold it into two and give it a good press. So then I added the interface at the neck depth there, and then I'll bring in the ashoke pieces. There are two for each side of the neckline, and I'll pin it on the neckline, just following the slant. I'll pin it down. You will always have to work with your pins for easy sewing, alright? Pinning it to the two sides of the neckline. I'll flip to the bad side and you see the ½ inch that we marked. That's what we'll be using to stitch the ashoke to the neckline. Okay, I'll stop it at the ½ inch we have at the neck depth. Okay, stitching that, I'll then want to notch it on the wrong side of the fabric. At that corner, I'll just notch it inwards using ½ inch. That line that we marked, the ½ inch, don't exceed that. So notching it and being careful at the corner, we have ½ inch like so. And then flipping it to the right side again, I'll simply tuck in the ashoke that we have on both sides of this neckline. I'll tuck them in and make sure they overlap properly. And that ½ inch that we have there, I'll tuck it inwards, okay? And then I'll pin the ashoke, the two ashoke at that spot. Turn the fabric to the other side. You see the allowance we have here. So I'll use ½ inch to stitch it. Just so we'll be sure of where we are stitching, I'm using a colored chalk to mark that point. I'll pin it and then take it to the sewing machine and sew it along that line. After sewing it and everything is intact, I'll simply trim out the excess that we have and then I'll overlock all the way round to avoid fraying. Okay, so I will interlock it and give it a good press. So then after that, we will now place the pocket. You remember the point that I notched for the pocket position? I simply brought in these pieces of fabric that measures about 10 inches length and 8 inches width and pin it starting from the point I notched and pin it downwards. I place the right side facing the right side. The right side of that piece facing the right side of the front panel. I'll pin it like so. And then I'll take it to the machine and stitch it with ½ inch on both sides. And this is what it looks like. Then I'll trim the excess of what I have of the ashoke at the shoulder line, making sure it is equal. I'll simply align the shoulder line properly. Then I brought in this piece of fabric that's about 15 inches length and 8 inches width. I folded it into two and making sure that the folded part of the back panel aligns with the folded part of this piece of fabric. I'll pin it down and then cut it along the neck line of the back panel and trim out whatever excess I have on the shoulder slope. And setting the back panel aside, I'll measure 3 inches, okay, 3 inches all the way around the neckline and cut it out. And that's the facing for the back panel. Now I'll notch the midpoint, okay, both on the facing and the midpoint of the back panel neckline, and then I will open it to the right side. Okay, now at the midpoint, where I notch, I'll bring in the midpoint of the facing. This facing has to be right side of that fabric, facing the right side of the fabric of the main garment. Okay, and then I'll use this hemming gum and stitch it all the way around using 1/2 inch, and I'll give it a good press and interlock the edge like this. Now I attach the pocket just like I did to the front panel, and at this point I'll bring in the front panel again. So then I'll place it very close to where I top stitch on the back, the back facing. Okay, and then I'll simply sandwich the front panel into the facing and the back panel like this, and I'll use 1/2 inch to sew it to the edge. I'll do the same thing to the other side of the shoulder. Stitch it with 1/2 inch, and this is what it looks like. Okay, so then I went ahead to interlock the sleeve opening, and I have about 22 inches. So I'll be cutting the shoke of about 24 inches. It's better I have excess than to struggle to, make it go round. So then I will place it on the sleeve opening like this, and I'll use 1/2 inch to stitch it. I'll stitch it and interlock because the shoke frays a lot. Then I'll bring the sleeve opening together and make sure the stitching line aligns. Okay, pin it, and from that sleeve opening I'll take 1 inch, top stitch it at where I'll be sewing 1/2 inch into the pocket. The pocket now will be 1/2 inch all the way round, and then I will stitch it towards the garment again to a point that it will be 1 inch. I'll then stitch it down to where I'll have the slit opening. I'll iron it open, hem it, and that's it for the bubu. So if this tutorial adds any value to you at all, kindly give me a thumbs up, leave a comment for me in the comment section, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video.